Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on disciplined entrepreneurship, hosted by Nexford University. We're really excited to be here on this very special project and discussion, and what we're calling a conversation between friends. The group that is here has been on the journey of entrepreneurship and helping investors and think about these issues for a long time. We're often in conversation, and so we're very excited to include you in our conversation today. So thanks for coming. My name is Laila Masharia. I am a senior advisor at Nexford University, but also a serial entrepreneur and investor. I have invested in the US and in Africa over the last 20 years and have learned so many lessons along the way and have developed a real passion for this field, but also an interest in helping others do it better and support entrepreneurs in a better way. And so we'll jump right into it. I have learned a lot on my journey building. I'm an angel investor, so I've invested in the Africa Digital Media Institute. I'm on the board. I'm a board member at ABSA Kenya, and also the vice chair of Centum Investments Limited. So have a bird's eye view across the landscape of investment across Africa, and so I'm really excited to introduce you to two co-travelers in this journey of entrepreneurship. The first is Stephen Gugu, and Stephen is a CEO and the founder at Investia. He's also a founder at the Victoria Business Angel Networks. These days, African founders have all kinds of options when they're looking for early stage financing. We're really excited about that. And Steve has done a lot of work over the last decade or more building this ecosystem to support entrepreneurs. And we'll be hearing more as we discuss with him. His journey will come out over the course of the conversation. I'm so proud to also introduce my friend, Sam Mwangi. Sam Mwangi is the founder and CEO of Social Meds Digital. And he does a lot of work in the area of digital marketing and supporting brands. And he'll be talking more about that. So we are going to jump right into the conversation, and I'll start with you, Sam. Maybe you can share key milestones in your journey as an entrepreneur to help the audience get a sense of who you are and where you are along this journey. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Laila. It's good to be here with you all. I started the business Social Meds Digital in 2015. As an entrepreneur who did not have an idea of my space. I just had passion. And I was like, perhaps there's something that I can turn this passion into, because I was very into social media when I was in campus. And I wondered, what more can I do? And saw that there was a gap in helping businesses get on social media in a meaningful way that helps them reach their audience and convert their sales. So from that point, the journey has been a step-by-step progression. Learning different things to do with running a business and how the principles of business are different from the skill and expertise you have, and just learning to grow those separately or on their own as we progress. Right now, we're a team of 22 people, and in any given year, we work with more than 100 youth across the country, Kenya, and we run campaigns both within the country and outside the country based on the assignments that we have. So that's just a nutshell of the business and my journey.
Thank you so much, Sam. What an impressive story. I mean, we started together when it was a two-man show and you were exploring, what services you could offer the market, and seeing that trajectory over these years is really very, very impressive. And we can't wait to hear how you did that. Stephen, jump in. What has your journey been? Why do you think you have something to say about entrepreneurship or investment?
Thank you very much, Laila. Pleasure to be here and to meet with everybody on the call. And Sam, really interesting to hear about your journey also. So I started out my journey actually in corporate a number of years back. I spent 6 years working in corporate in a big investment bank. And after spending a number of years, I felt as though most of the work that I was doing was focused around sort of like the big kind of corporates, listed companies in the stock exchange and so forth. And I wanted to have an impact working directly with entrepreneurs. After going for my business, I went for my MBA back in 2010, 2011. After going for my MBA, I decided to found Investia Africa. And the whole idea at that point was really to form a fund that would be investing in entrepreneurs. And so I'd met with some colleagues of mine, some friends of mine out of business school. And the idea was very simple. We raise a fund out of Europe and we invest in renewable energy projects. But then as fate would have it, we found 1 year into that we needed to pivot. It wasn't as easy to be able to do that. And so my two other colleagues who were part of that business, one was a Belgian, the other was a Ugandan. They dropped off at that point, and they left me with this vehicle that was an entity, and there was really nothing in it. It was a shell at that point. And so, I decided to refocus the business from sort of like that idea of the fund into, helping entrepreneurs to make better decisions. And the whole idea behind that is that one of the key skill sets that I had was this idea of financial modeling. And a lot of financial modeling is really just telling your story or the story of any business in numbers. And you can use these if you want to raise funding, if you want to sort of like create a focus for your business, if you want to value your business. I mean, you can be able to do those different things. And so really started from there. And I remember, starting by just leveraging my social capital by inviting people into a room, just as an idea, and sort of like training those people so that they would be my employees, because we're using a very specific methodology to be able to do the work that we are doing. And really then, after training those people, then now moving from that point in terms of recruiting them to be part of the team. So far we've moved numbers. There's a time we were quite big. Now we are a team of 12 people who are full-time. We work a lot with consultants. So we have over 15 consultants that we engage in at any one point. We've executed projects in over 10 different African countries. We've helped entrepreneurs raise over $15 million as at now. We've done lots of valuation-related work and so forth. And so that's then been the journey, right? It's advisory work where we work with entrepreneurs and innovators on the other side. That's one leg of my journey. The other leg is really out of the work that you do on the advisory side, we also got to see lots of opportunities that you could invest into. And so then in terms of then asking what can we do for some of those entrepreneurs, we ended up creating an angel network called the Victoria Business Angels Network, which then makes investments to early stage companies. I'm also one of the angel investors in that network. So far, we have over 60 angel investors. We've done, I think, now 11 deals. We've deployed over $1 million in capital by the different angel investors. Some of these companies are doing really well in the ecosystem. Your companies like Safi Power, Market Force, I sort of like straddle those two parts to a certain extent. Thank you.
Excellent, fascinating. And since I have you on stage, what does disciplined entrepreneurship mean to you, Stephen? When you hear that, what comes to mind?
Thanks for that. So a couple of things, and for me, I'll put it sort of probably in the context in which I operate, where I work with lots of businesses, whether they be startups or be SMEs. And for me, what comes to mind in the current context is what we've been seeing from the perspective of companies which have raised a lot of money, but are facing serious headwinds. We just learned, at least if you're from Kenya, in this case, there's a company called Sandy, for instance, that has raised, significant sums of money, I think over $30 million. But they've just said they're going to be closing down. I don't think they're the only ones. In the continent, there's quite a number of those kinds of stories that we hear about. And so for me, disciplined entrepreneurship is this idea of, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, always having a mind in terms of running your affairs in a very disciplined way, especially on the finances side. That, as you're building, you don't take excessive risk. That you don't just think about, let's go big or let's go home. You think about taking the risk, about scaling, but you always have an eye in terms of how you manage your finances, so that if some of the things that you're working on don't work out as you anticipated, you can still be able to have a business that is able to take care of its employees, able to take care of its customers, and so forth and so forth. And there's so many reasons why you need to have that in mind as an entrepreneur, because the business is not just about you, right? Once you're out there and you're fulfilling a certain need in the market, there's clients who come to rely on you, come to rely in terms of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And they want you to continue, right? And you want to keep sort of like solving that specific problem. There's, employees who are part of your team. And these employees, they've chosen to come work in your company, probably could have worked somewhere else. and they have families behind them and so forth. And so that discipline that you create also helps them in terms of just being able to meet their day-to-day objectives. Then the stakeholders, is your board members, is your investors, etc., who also expect you to have that discipline in terms of how you're sort of running things. So for me, that's one key way of thinking about the discipline entrepreneurship side. I'll stop there and maybe also hear what Sam has to say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sam, jump in. This is really great.
All right. I'll explain my understanding of disciplined entrepreneurship with a story. In 2020, when we all had to go and work from home, I gained a lot of weight. I will not say we gained a lot of weight because I don't want to stigmatize anyone, but I gained a lot of weight. And so to cut that weight, I had to put several measures in place. And someone would think that I put measures in place that within 6 months or 3 months, my weight was down, but that's not how it worked. It took almost 14 months of trying and failing and coming back and amending. So there were 3 key pillars that I had to focus on to be able to get back in shape. The first one was, of course, food, because we say that losing weight is 80% food and 20% workout. The second pillar was gym and physical activity, putting in my steps and counting them with my watch. And the third pillar was alcohol and just controlling my intake of alcohol because it has a lot of calories. So that took about 14 months to be able to lose a whopping 22 kg. And I will not say that it was 14 months of steady progression. There were times when I went back down. I just decided this weekend I'm going to party. I've gained 2 kgs, yet I worked out so hard this week. And so because I'm depressed, I'm going to go and work out. But then I come back and I say, I forgive myself for what I did. I need to get back on track. So for me, disciplined entrepreneurship is similar. Knowing that you have a certain goal as an entrepreneur in mind, but then understanding the different pillars that will get you there. And for me, the pillars would be finance, understanding the finances of your business, sales, knowing that regardless of how well you know to manage your finances, if you don't understand sales and the sales function of a business, that the business will still struggle. Management, people management, working in a consultancy firm and working with a lot of young people, understanding people and people management is very key in my firm. And finally, product. All these things we are doing, if the product or output that we're giving the customer out there is not resonating with their current need, then all those other principles will not help us run a successful business. So these are 4 principles that are very important, and they work. They kind of work. They have independent laws around them, but they work together to drive our business forward. And finally, it's all about consistency, improvement, and persistence. So persistence is the most important thing, but not persisting in the same thing, but persistence in improving what you're doing. Then you stay consistent with it. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. There's so much there. What really resonates with me, there's a number of things. So we've heard from both of you that there's the discipline, which is in what you do around, especially finance. I think we tend to call out finance because usually when that's not working in a business, it's one of the first things you can tell. But it doesn't mean the other pillars are not as important. So this idea of financial discipline, it's also the place where being human, many of us fall down with overspending or over-optimism, especially being, or hubris, being very arrogant, being some of the areas where we stumble. But I'm also hearing about discipline in a more holistic way. So this idea of, I think, Stephen, you're bringing out this idea that just treating your business not just as a hobby or a project of yours, but understanding that a lot of people are counting on you to be, I want to use the word maybe reverent, like so to treat your business with the reverence and respect that it deserves, because if you mismanage it, a lot of people are affected. So that's a very interesting way of looking at sustainability. And then from you, from both of you, I've kind of heard about this idea of thinking about experimentation, right? So it's not about, and back to hubris, not about going big or going home or all the glamour or the things that are being said out there, but more about making sure that the product you're offering is first of all needed by the market, then secondly, that you're pleasing your customer, right? So the sales process, or what you talk about product, Sam. So that's really, really helpful. And I think really resonate with me in a number of ways. And I think when both of you have come to this conclusion, I mean, you're saying that both of you have been in business for a while, like all of us, you've had ups and downs. But I'm wondering whether both of you could take some time and share with us in that journey, are there books or concepts or tools that have been most useful to you that you could maybe share with our audience for us to check out? And what about those tools or books or speakers, whatever it is, really stuck with you and has been a helpful thing? And to go a little bit further than that, if you can give us a concrete example of how that concept has played out for you and made you kind of believe in it. We can start with Sam on that.
All right. So I will mention 3 books and just touch on 2 of them, which will be relevant to all of us. The first one is called Build to Sell. Build to Sell. I think it's by someone called Mark Warillo. And it's a book that simply talks about how to build your business with a mindset of selling it at a later date. And it means whether or not you want to sell it, how to build it as a sellable business. So that's really helped in terms of helping me figure out in the consultancy space, how to create products as opposed to just solutions, because solutions can be a bit complex given that each person will need their own different kind of solution. But if you build a product, then a product can be sold to many people. So that really helped us be able to align and know that. So right now as a business, we have 3 different products that we sell to our customers. So Build to Sell really, really helped to do with how to build your business in a sellable way. The second one is Agencynomics. It's simply the economics of running a marketing agency. So I will not go so much into this one, but it's simply an encouragement to each entrepreneur on this call to also go deeper and look for industry-specific books within your space and look at industry-specific leaders and what they have to say about running a successful business in your space. The third one is called Profit First. I will say, honestly, this is a book I came across about almost 2 years ago, and I'm still working to fully implement what it talks about. It's a very simple concept, and it talks about if I was purchasing this pen, 1,000 of them, and I'm meant to sell it because that's the type of business that I do, I buy and sell. That means that if I purchased it, say, for $2, then I want to sell it for $3. And in that margin of $1, there's a certain amount of it which is profit. Because maybe I'll have my costs of input, my costs of transportation, my costs of waiting for the money to come out, depending on who I'm selling to. But there's an element of profit in that $1. So if my profit is 10 cents of a dollar, the simple concept of profit first is when you get your payment, take 10 cents of a dollar for every dollar that you've been paid and put it in a profit account. So it's a very phenomenal concept. It looks very simple, but it takes time to implement. And I've also implemented that in terms of having separate bank accounts. Then it helps you be able to plan for your finances immediately they come in, as opposed to when the finances coming in, taking care of what's most urgent in that period. So for example, in a consulting business, payroll is our biggest cost as opposed to any other input. So having a separate payroll account from your OPEX account, from your tax account, from your profit account, from your director's account, and then being able to decide what the ratios are. And the book guides on the ratios for the business. It also gives examples of businesses that are in the product space versus service space. And it helps someone to really come up with a simple way of getting profit for your business for every single transaction, as opposed to an event that occurs when the books are done.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think many people who are entrepreneurs in our context, in the African context, but even beyond, really relate to how a business feels when it's out of control, right? So when you really talk about build to sell, the first principle is really around this idea of understanding why you're in the business. If you want, we talk about, do you want to be rich or do you want to be queen or king? There's some people who go into business for a lifestyle business. They just want to make a small margin, maybe pay themselves. But if you envision a business where one day you will walk away and the business continues to endure beyond, I think in Built to Sell, they talk about the bounded efforts of the entrepreneur, the bounded networks of the entrepreneur. You have to make your business into a machine. And this book and builttosell.com is a very powerful system that helps you think about how to automate things, how this business runs without you. And I think the ability to sell your business is very tied to the idea that you don't have to be there for it to operate. And then profits first is powerful stuff, right? Because it's really, many people run businesses for very long. They are exhausted. They can't tell why, but it's because of needing to understand that they're running this business for you so that you can have a better lifestyle, so that everybody thrives. But entrepreneurs are famous for being the last ones to take money out of a business. And you'll hear people who have run businesses for 20 years and are always on the margin, only take money when it's in excess, as opposed to being very disciplined for the very beginning about making sure you're paying yourself first and that all your costs and the structure of the business are designed around that objective. So thank you so much, Sam. This is something, just those two books, we could do entire sessions on them because they are life-changing for entrepreneurs. But I like Stephen. Stephen, for you, what books or concepts have been helpful on this journey?
Yeah, thanks. I think the first one I'm going to use is one that I read this year. It's called The One Thing. And what I like about the book, The One Thing, and I recommend that for all entrepreneurs, is the focus aspect. One of the quotes from that book is this idea of do one thing that has effects rather than many things that have side effects, right? And I really like that, just as a simple quote, because for an entrepreneur, what I've learned over time is that the most important asset you have is your time and how you use it. You could use it for things which have a lot of leverage or things which don't have leverage. And so if you're constantly then trying to monitor that and then being very clear in terms of how you're spending your time, you will see how that will have an impact in your business. And at least, for us, what we did at the beginning of this year, we even started like a book club where everybody went through that. And it's just been amazing. If I look at our numbers between last year and this year, they're quite impressive. I think we're probably up something like almost 40-50% compared to the previous year, which is amazing, right? And it's just having everybody just being very clear in terms of what they're working on and what kind of leverage that has at the end of the day. So that's one book. The other book that I read some time back and I really like is this. It's a book called Rework. There's a sister book to it called It Doesn't Have to Be This Crazy at Work. And I think, as an entrepreneur, at times you can get to this phase that you're really focusing a lot on the fear of missing out. You're looking at what other people are reporting when you meet with the other founders out there. You're sort of like following what they're telling you, and you don't realize that at times what you're working on is actually the most critical thing. This idea that at times you're really looking at scaling, you're thinking that the biggest thing about your business, can you report how many staff members do you have? How big is your office? What location are you under? And some of those things at times could derail you as a founder, because then you're not focused on the unit economics of your business. What does your business need for it to be able to thrive? And it's this idea, and I'll use an example here of one of our clients who runs a logistics business, right? This is a client who nobody knows in this town. If you met with him on the street, you would not know him, right? The guy runs a business which turns over 2 billion shillings every single year, right? Very simple person. He runs a simple logistics business. He's not worried about the formal. I mean, there's quite a number of logistics startups that have come into the market, and I've had serious challenges. But even when that was happening, I remember sort of like telling him, hey, you need to be thinking about this GC. And he told me, what? I know how this business is run. It's a very simple business. Technology just comes to accelerate, but it doesn't replace what the business is at the end of the day. So I know it's that idea as an entrepreneur that you don't have to copy what is out there. You need to sit down with your business, understand your business really well, understand the unit economics, ask yourself what drives the business, and work on those things consistently, right? Don't worry so much about what's happening out there, because there's so many people who will come and they'll say big things, but then in a couple of years, you will not see them, because some of those things maybe don't come to reality. So I like that because it gives you another flavor. I'm going to add the last book here, which is one that is called Blitzscaling. Right? And Blitzscaling is by Reid Hoffman. And the reason why I like the book of the book Blitzscaling, it gives you the different flavor, right? Of think big, take risks, right? Because as an entrepreneur, I think you need to be in this space where, yes, you're very disciplined in terms of how you're doing things, and even disciplined in terms of the kind of risks you're taking. But you do need to take risk at certain points in your business to help the business or move in a quantum kind of way. And I believe that businesses are not linear. Specifically, there are certain moments which can catapult you to the next level, almost like a staircase in this case. And you need to be very aware in terms of those moments and being able then to be able to take those kind of opportunities. I don't know what they call them, risk or opportunities, so to say. So yeah, those are the brief I would pick for that. Thanks.
Yeah, those are great, all powerful lessons. So this one about, especially in an ecosystem like Nairobi's or Lagos, where everybody's in the newspapers, they're winning awards. It's very easy to start thinking that it's saying something fundamental about you and how you're running the business. But your example about the logistics firm says a lot. So at the end of the day, are you passionate about your customers? How is your top line doing? Are you a healthy, sustainable enterprise? Goes a much longer way than focusing on the headlines. That's very, very powerful. And I also like this idea of, kind of the team and growing, kind of biting off what you can chew, even as you're keeping a mind on, I want to think big, I want to grow. You achieve that by coming back to focus on the fundamentals. So very powerful stuff. I think for me, I can share a couple of mine. So I love Built to Sell, Profit First. All of these are great. And I think yours, Stephen has been telling me about the one thing for a while, so I'm going to really get it and do it. And then for me, I think some that I can add into the pile. So there's one that's called The Road Less Stupid. And I have it right here and I keep it with me. And The Road Less Stupid really talks about, some of us entrepreneurs have a gift for growing companies, for making sales. Some of us are effusive. We're able to forge partnership. You leave the house and you come back with a partnership. And so some of us do have a gift of making money. But what this book really talks about is that the first question he asks is, if you went back, any person here, an entrepreneur, even individually, and you could unwind like 3 of the biggest financial mistakes you've made in your life, how much money would you have today? So the idea that he's trying to really explain, and this is Keith Cunningham, is that a big part of bearing the fruits of your business is really not losing everything. It's not about making money, it's how much do you keep. And it goes back to profit first. Some of these things we've talked about, because you have a big top line, but if you're not disciplined and if you're haphazard and disorganized, you can actually look after 10 years and there's nothing to show for it. You as the entrepreneur have taken nothing out and you're not sure what it was all for. So this idea of really, so he's an older guy. So he goes through what he and his friends, all the mistakes they've made. And he's really an advocate for entrepreneurs, making it a discipline to have thinking time. So there's the disciplines of the things you can do in your business. But as an entrepreneur, one of the disciplines we know is self-care. That's a big one for many entrepreneurs. But another one is really setting aside time to think, to reflect, to ask yourself those tough questions that keep you on the path. So The Road Less Stupid, advice from the chairman of the board, very strongly recommended. And then I think there's another book that is very helpful. When a company has moved and you're a bit bigger, it's called The Founder's Mentality. And the founder's mentality really speaks to the idea that, and it's back to those businesses that are a little bit more successful, a bit more established, some of whom have moved from what they call the insurgency position, where you're an outsider advocating for your company, reforming an industry. And then you find yourself as the incumbent. You've had some success. People know your brand. They're used to having you around. And it's very easy, especially with scale or size, to start becoming a little bit complacent. And so he tries, this is from BCG, and they're really trying to get us thinking about what are those characteristics from a smaller, more hungry firm that a large firm can take on board and try to keep, so that you defend that hunger, that dynamism that can really die. So it's about reducing bureaucracy. It's about keeping that insurgency mentality. Even though the founders have often long since gone, what do you do to keep that cost consciousness, that passion for the customer? There's all these things that you can do that keep your company nimble and vibrant, so that you don't become a victim of your own success and find yourself as that incumbent who other people are coming to disrupt, right? So very good books. Thank you. Again, we've talked about books over time and we've learned together in this field. And so very exciting to hear from you about this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about learning. So we're saying that from all of us here have books and tools and lessons that have brought us to where we are. So what we're saying is that you can learn over time to become a better entrepreneur, right? It's something that you can build. And one of the myths we'll talk about in a minute is this myth that you're kind of born an entrepreneur, right? There could be some traits that you have that make entrepreneurship maybe not as uphill a struggle. But I think what we're debunking is this idea that you land one day and you've got it all figured out and you start scaling and it's a matter of 2 years. But I'm wondering what you think about the role of a more structured, formal approach to learning entrepreneurship. What are your views? Maybe, Stephen, we can start with you. Is this the kind of thing that you should study? Is it something that you should even get certified in? Yes or no?
Well, I don't know about getting certified in entrepreneurship, unless you want to teach entrepreneurship. And the reason is that I say the true test of an entrepreneur is whether the market, wants to receive your product. Whether you're solving a problem, the market is interested in buying that product, and you get some value out of it, right? Because you sell it and you get some value out of it. And so to that, for me, that being the measure, then whether you get the certificate or not, the most important certificate is from the customer. And so then coming back to, can you teach entrepreneurship? I think there's definitely certain aspects of entrepreneurship that can be taught, right? And there's aspects that I don't think, they can be communicated to, and you have to then try them out as a entrepreneur, innovator, etc. And what I mean by that is, I spent quite a bit of time in this phase where we try to run accelerators for innovators. On the Victoria side, we work with early stage companies, so we do a lot of accelerators, incubators and so forth, where we train entrepreneurs, we coach people to be entrepreneurs. And what I found is that you find usually there's two different kinds of people, right? There's the kind of people who, they have the knack for it. They can spot the opportunities. They have this idea that they're willing to jump out there to try the risk. They're not sort of like very cautious in terms of how they figure it out. And then you also have the guys who are very calculative, who also like to figure out everything in the room before they go out there, right? And unfortunately, you need to have a certain risk profile, in my view, or at least develop that risk profile of just trying things out. Because if you ask most of entrepreneurs, when they started out, they were trying out, right? They in their mind, it was clear what they wanted to achieve. But when they went out there, they were trying, and they found this didn't work, and they moved to the next thing, and they moved to the next thing. And it's because they really enjoy that journey to a certain extent, or they're able to keep then moving from one piece to the other. However, having said that, that accounts for the risk, the opportunity spotting, and just jumping out there accounts for a very small portion for me, for an entrepreneur. There's a bigger portion, which is also just the discipline of getting things moving, right? Because once you sort of like figure those things, you realize that a business also has different elements. There's the sales element, there's the marketing, there's the finance, there's a what? And those are different skill sets that for you as a fundraising, for you as an innovator, you can learn, right? Assuming you have the first one, then you can be able to build around these different aspects to accelerate your growth, right? And so for me, how I've seen it is, yes, there's certain things which are not easy to teach someone who's not an entrepreneur, so to say, but there's some that help a lot in terms of accelerating, reducing the risks. Because also some of these people will say that they can spot an opportunity really fast. The challenge that they have is that also they keep jumping all over the place. At times they take risks, which at times then, unsettle the business completely. So there are certain elements of entrepreneurship can definitely be taught. And I believe that there's certain aspects which is very difficult. You just have to get out of the market and try them out. But I'm curious to hear what Sam has to say and what Laila you also have to say around this.
Sam, what do you think? Can entrepreneurship be taught? And is there value to doing it in a more formal way, like in a classroom-based format, maybe in addition to the practical part? What do you think?
Yes, I agree with Stephen. It can be taught, but there are some things that need to be done in the real world, so to speak. I would say entrepreneurship is like whitewater rafting. If you've ever gone whitewater rafting, you'll be given some safety precautions just before, as you wear the lifesaver jackets, you'll be given a helmet. You'll be told, when we go into this corner, this is what you do. When you go into this corner, this is what you do. Theoretically, you will know that when you go into this type of corner, we move our weight to this side of the boat so that we don't get caught in the rapids. However, there is that element of now you actually have to get in the water and start doing it. So I think the most valuable way of teaching entrepreneurship would be where the entrepreneurs or the students are attached to real life businesses, whether they are owned or owned by other people. And then the exercises and the things that they're being asked to do are being applied in these actual businesses, because someone who's sat on the sidelines and been taught about whitewater rafting versus someone who's been in the river, there'll be a big difference in terms of understanding how the theory works.
Great, very interesting. Yeah, I think on my part, I really do think that mentorship is important for entrepreneurship. There's a lot of myths, we'll get into those next, about what entrepreneurship is. And to the extent that you can have people around you who've been there before and can help coach you and support you, or even brainstorm with you, because many of the questions we have as entrepreneurs, even as humans, don't have straight answers. So that idea of a community and ways to learn from people. The thing with this, though, is that I think how you learn from people, there's not just one set way. So, for example, the books that we've read, mentors, all of these are ways in which you can be taught. Some other people do it through videos. You can go on YouTube and teach yourself. But certainly having I think of the OMP program at SBS. I think Stephen approached this, and it's really to teach people who are it's the owner managers program at Strathmore. And the idea is really to teach people who are running a business to teach it in a more structured way. We also know about the Stanford Seed program, really helping people who've been in business actually for a while start to bring discipline and structure into their business. So those kinds of programs, anytime when you have structure that infuses discipline, depending on the way that you learn, I think the format is not as important as the fact that you've taken it upon yourself to have a more structured approach. So very exciting. Let's get into myths. What are some of the common myths about entrepreneurship that you think need to be debunked? Let's save some lives here. Let's start with Stephen. What are common myths you hear about where as an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, they're still saying that?
Well, I think for me, I'll pick on probably one, which is this idea that you can make it quick in entrepreneurship, right? And you don't hear this enough, that so many people, when they see someone who's made it, they don't see the journey, they just see the result. And they don't realize that, for you as an entrepreneur, even for the, that company that's, ginormous, so to say, they also have their days when the founders are just like, what's happening, right? So, because, almost crisis by crisis management, only that the nature of the crisis changes to a certain extent. So for me, it's this idea that if you're starting something, it's going to take you time to get to where you want it to be, right? I spoke about my good friend, the logistics business. And that guy told me he started his business back in 2006, right? And, I was just like, oh my goodness, I thought, you imagine that in the next 5 years, you'll be that startup which has scaled across. We hear all the startups, all the stories about companies like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, with ChatGPT, which sort of like have amassed, I don't know how many users within a short amount of time. And I think at times we forget that, first of all, I think there's a certain element of great exceptions around that. And those are not yet businesses. The fact that you've gotten to all this number of users doesn't necessarily mean that you have a sustainable business. You still have to go through in terms of how do you create a business out of that you're able to generate revenues and people are willing to pay you consistently for the work that you're doing. And I like using the example about someone I met with very early on the advisory side, and told me, if you're creating an advisory business, you need to realize that the first 10 years is going to be about building your brand. The next 10 years is going to be about reaping from your brand, so to say. And the next 10 years is about succession plan. I don't necessarily think that it follows from that perspective, but this idea of just having a long-term view in terms of what you're doing, because it's going to take time and you'll have to take a couple of pivots here and there, and you have to enjoy the journey. Yeah, you have to enjoy the pivot, the idea of sort of like figuring out what's happening and deciding let's make a different perspective. And then the other one, and I don't know if this is the best place, I think there's a myth around whenever people start a business, they imagine that it's their business that's going to make it, all the others are going to fail, right? So when you sit here and we say, I don't know, 3 out of 10 companies will not be there in the next 10 years, everyone believes I'm the one who's going to make it, the rest are not going to, which is really good for you to think from that perspective. Of course, as a founder, you have to be very confident. But for me, the reason I say it's a myth is because you also need to be aware of when to quit. Right? There's certain things that you start out and you sort of like try moving, and you'll figure they don't work. And at times, I'm fascinated by entrepreneurs who've thrown in the towel and are focused on something different because they've saved themselves going down a route that will not necessarily convert in terms of what they want to convert. And they've taken something else and probably, it works, maybe it doesn't work. So the idea is that even as you go in as an entrepreneur, you need to have a certain level of humility that, to the point that Sam was making about being persistent, that yes, you're very persistent, but you also know when to sort of like refocus or pivot into something different. So yeah, those would be my two sort of like kind of myths. Thanks.
Thank you. So much wisdom there. Sam, what do you think? Two or more myths?
I have a couple, and I'll really summarize them in terms of some myths. One of them is that all entrepreneurs are risk takers. That's not necessarily true. There's someone who wrote on Twitter the other day that if you're in a startup and your CEO is always saying some big words about growth and scale and all that, you should be very afraid because CEOs are like husbands. The more boring, the more stable. But the more he's talking all the time big things, the more risky it's going to get at the office. So not all business is about taking huge risks. Some people have just grown by even growing their revenue by less than 10%, but consistently for over 30 years and getting to $20 million in revenue, but the consistent growth has been very small. The second one is that businesses either succeed or fail. It's not always an either or. For example, Threads launched the other day through Instagram, and we can all see that the engagement went down. So do we then just summarize and say that Threads is a failure? It's not always that simple. There are many factors involved, and it's not an either or situation. The third one is entrepreneurs are born, not made. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, because in any industry, the leaders in industry, it's the ones who have consistently worked on sharpening a specific skill set. I mean, I'd be even bold enough to ask Steve if that person in logistics is good in all types of logistics. Like if I have a chain of 30 restaurants, can he do my logistics to deliver food to people's homes? Or is he good in a specific line in logistics? So it's all about hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And then finally, is that entrepreneurship, if you launch your business, you'll have more freedom because you have to work less hours. This is generally not the case at the beginning. This only comes like in phase 2 when Steve said reaping from the business. But that's after you put in the right systems and structures to ensure that your business does not depend on you and can run without you. Thanks.
Great. Yes, so I'll share some of my own. These are also true and so rich. So for me, one of them is, there's even a book written about it by Scott Shane, which is called The Illusions of Entrepreneurship. And one of the things that's happening in our ecosystem and maybe around the world right now is that there's a cult of entrepreneurship, right? Like everybody's a leader, the same way we're all leaders, and leadership is very glamorized right now. With really underestimating and downplaying the pain of leadership and the sacrifices and trade-offs that come in. It's the same thing that's happening with entrepreneurship. So there's this idea now and a lot of pressure for everybody to be an entrepreneur. And if you want to be an employee for your life, you're really shamed. It's almost like you can't say it out loud. But the reality is, like in this book, this is based on the US. I'm sure the statistics are different, but not dissimilar in principle from Africa. But really, he finds that if you have somebody who left their job and went into entrepreneurship, and there was a parallel universe of following that same person, the person would have more income if they stayed in employment. They would have more benefits because usually there's health insurance and other things that come along. And overall, they would be less stressed and healthy, right? If they stay in employment. So there's this idea that having a job or wanting a job is, if there's FOMO, that's one of the places where people really think entrepreneurs is where it's at. But I wish we would stop pressuring people and allow everybody to find their balance for what works with them at that certain time. Yeah, and then there's another one really around management. It's close to that, which is this idea that managers are also born. So you could be, at a junior position today, and then you become a manager, and somehow you're expected to be to know how to do things immediately and to be this perfect nurturing manager and all of that. I think that's also another area where there's a myth that needs to be debunked. But the last one is really around, and I think I'm picking up a little bit on what Stephen said, which is, if you try a new product and the product fails, let's say we're in an experimental mode. So we have an established business, but we want to try a new product. You put it out into the market, in an iterative way, you get data and you pull it back, or you pivot a little bit in your business. There's a big myth that is failure. So really trying to get design thinking as a mentality, and this mentality of lean startups, quick experiments, and that being the way that saves you from doing a very big, a major thing that could go wrong, is, I think, a cultural thing we haven't yet gotten. When people come against you, let's say as CEO, and you're trying to run quick experiments, it's very easy to hear people saying, oh, that failed. Why are we spending money on such a thing? Because they think that pivot is a sign of failure, when sometimes that's actually what lends itself to sustainability. So those are some of the myths. Another quick round question. Could you share a common example? We've talked about disciplined entrepreneurship, but that means there must be something that is undisciplined entrepreneurship. And you, as people who have walked this journey over time, I'm sure there's a few things that if I'm running a business today, maybe you can tell me really quickly how to self-diagnose and check from an assessment point of view whether I'm undisciplined. What are some clues in your mind, Stephen, that suggest that you would say is an example of undisciplined entrepreneurship?
Yeah, thanks for that. Leila, you mentioned in the previous question, just to jump back on that, you mentioned a few things about, how the life of an entrepreneur can be, right? And the employed person, at times it's probably a bit easier. Then I look at some of my friends who took that journey. And every so often I envy them, but on the balance, I think I enjoy my life much more. I think the one thing that entrepreneurship gives you is there's a certain level of satisfaction that you will, I don't know, I mean, I've been employed, I didn't have it then, I wouldn't say you'll never get, but I never had it then, which is just this idea that when you wake up every day, you have limitless potential, right? And that for me keeps me going. I could decide today, this is what we're focusing on. I know it's my decisions that are going to help that in terms of making things move. So I love that idea of having limitless potential, that based on your discipline, based on your vision, based on how you're sort of putting your team together and how you guys are sort of working together in synchrony, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. I find at times when, at least when I was employed, I felt like my potential was always bounded by what the vision of the company was, what the boss sort of thought. And here I am hoping that my employees are not listening to this. But I like that as an idea, limitless potential. It always keeps you going. And the fact that every so often as an entrepreneur, the concept of risk, yes, it is risky, but when I discuss with some of my friends and they tell me, oh my goodness, my company is laying people off, I'm worried about that from a risk perspective. For me, I tell them, I've been jobless for the last God knows how long. So it's not something that comes to mind, so to say. So that risk of, anyway. But I just wanted to mention that. But coming back to undisciplined entrepreneurship, I think for me, the first key thing is, if you do not know what's the worth, how much does it cost you to create whatever product you have, whatever service you have, and deliver it to the final customer, then I would say that there's just, as an entrepreneur, you need to always know that. Because, you're selling something. I think Sam mentioned about the pen that was, I think, $1 and so forth. So for me, not knowing the numbers, not understanding the numbers, what does it cost me? What is the value that I'm getting out there? How am I charging for that? And I have a story about a business that I was sat in the board of that we were managing. And, we had the wrong numbers. We didn't know what it cost us to produce whatever we're producing to sell in the market. And I remember we had this year where everybody was just stepping on the gas pedal. And we literally, I think, doubled our revenue during that year. And after we doubled our revenues, we get the books at the end of the year, and the loss has even increased further, only for us to dig deeper and find out that we were selling things at a lower price than we were producing them for. And the company went into receivership, right? So having the right kind of data for me, that's a huge discipline. The other one, and this is maybe from my personal journey, is what's the word I wanted to use? And disciplined hiring. Hiring indiscriminately, right? At times as entrepreneurs, especially when you're not very in touch with your numbers, you could just keep hiring, and you see good talent, you bring the talent on board, but you're not really spending enough time to ask what is the talent doing, right? And in one of the books that I mentioned called Rework, they speak about as an entrepreneur, you should only hire when there's pain. Right? Don't hire just because someone left. Don't hire just because you found some good talent. Hire when you feel there's pain, and the pain is in the sense, you find that the service to the customers is diminishing. You guys are moving much slower in terms of some of the things that you want to achieve. You need to be very clear about it, because you see, once you've hired someone, that's a cost. It's a fixed cost that you've just added to your team, right? And terminating contracts is one of the most difficult things you'll have to do, because it's someone's life. Someone had taken time to do that. Especially especially when it's not because of non-performance. Right? So take your time in terms of hiring. I've seen startups that have hired, hundreds of people. And then you hear like 6 months later, 1 year later, people are being fired like 100 people. I wonder what that does to the soul of the CEO when you know that there's all these people that you're rendering jobless. So take your time. Anyway, I'll stop there. But those are 2 examples. Thank you.
Sam, undisciplined entrepreneurship looks like what?
Yes, I'll just give one example. So in marketing, and I'm in digital marketing, although now we're doing a bit of above the line, it's a very seasonal business. So you will have the people that you're working with in terms of clients on an annual basis. Then you'll have the seasons where you have more spend and you have new clients who come in. So for example, Easter in Kenya, Safari Rally has also become a big spending period. And the mother of them all is festive season and Christmas. In my space, I have seen businesses hire due to projected income, hiring due to projected business that may come. So I'd say that's one of the biggest things, and it also touches a bit on what Steve has said. You're projecting that there's gonna be this big pain. So let me just get a couple of people before the period reaches, and maybe they get poached by other firms. And I will not be able to deliver the best work. So I've seen that as a danger, because there are so many factors that are involved. You can still win the work, but you find payment is in 60, 90 days. But as Steve said, when you hire today, it's a fixed cost from today. And if it's not non-performance, it's very difficult to just let someone go. So that's to do with hiring. And the second thing is taking on costs based on projected income. I've seen that to be very dangerous, and the costs can be, maybe let me expand the office, let me get a few more machines, depending on your industry, we all understand taking on costs based on projected income, whether the costs are hiring or non-hiring related. I've seen those as 2 very dangerous things that I would call undisciplined entrepreneurship. Thanks.
Well, lots here. I think I agree with all of you on these examples. Lack of data is a big part of being undisciplined. Do you even know what business you're in? Do you know what your value drivers are? Do you know what your cost drivers are? How can you be the entrepreneur or the founder if you don't have a good grip on those? And then you're always being surprised. Then this whole idea, of course, of costs ahead of us. So entrepreneurs, because of our DNA, can really fall victim to hubris. So just as you're saying, this over optimism, this deal is going to come through. And optimism is one of the characteristics actually that people associate with entrepreneurs. But knowing that as an entrepreneur or as a founder, you can counteract that in yourself and always push back on that over optimism about things. Very, very interesting. I think I'd like to just comment on a couple of things that came up earlier. So one is this idea of, should you stay employed or should you go into entrepreneurship? And I think the middle ground between me and Steve, because, the statistics speak for themselves. It's a bloodbath for entrepreneurs, but I think the middle ground is really self-awareness, right? So, and what this means is that many of us look at large companies or somebody else running a business and say, oh, what's so hard about that? I could do that, and one day when you're really upset at your boss is when you say, okay, today is the day I'm going to storm off. And you underestimate what it really takes to pull off that journey. So the first step that I would really say in that decision is knowing yourself well, because some people have less risk tolerance than they think. The delivery of a good and services to somebody is more challenging than one might think. All of these are things that need you to know yourself quite well. This is not to say that everything has to be in place before you move. I think this was a point that was made earlier, that actually a big part of entrepreneurship, especially in a market like this, is moving with insufficient information. At some point, you'll never have everything you need to know to make a decision. And it's actually, in studies, it shows that it's one of the characteristics of a good CEO is this ability to move, decisiveness, even when all the data points are not in. And then there's this idea of scale. And I think also this was touched on by both of you, is this idea that you can have a tiny team, right? So some people associate a successful business with having a whole lot of people, but especially now with automations and other things, you might have a small team, leverages technology in some way, and you're able to compensate people well, and you're all aligned. So it doesn't always mean you have to have 500 or 150 people to feel like your business is worth being called a business. And I think, Sam, you did have a comment some time back about, how you used to see what your business might look like and what it ended up being. I don't know if you could just share that for listeners to kind of grasp that concept.
Yes, in terms of our pricing, when I started off the business in 2015, fresh from campus, we were charging about $100 a month to run your social media. I used to tell Laila a joke that if you paid us $300 or $400, we'll pick your kids from school for free. And at that rate, we wanted to get 1,000 clients. But then as I grew and as the team grew and we started to understand what it takes to run digital, we understood that there are different levels of marketing. If my sister sells blazers and she wants to sell them from tomorrow, I can help her out, but she may not afford a budget that the people who sell blazers across Africa have, and what they need to be able to ensure that they're selling 10,000 blazers per week. So also just getting to understand that we'd rather operate at this level where the input will be high, but so will be the reward. So we'll have less clients paying more as opposed to more clients paying less. So it's been a really good journey growing and understanding this, and also understanding that social media is one thing, but then there's communications, and then there's marketing, there's thinking about marketing and all the different levels to it, and deciding which place we want to be able to grow up ourselves and to give value. So it's really been a journey of starting off wanting 1,000 clients, and right now understanding that the number one in Kenya's market, doing revenues of more than $300 million, has less than 50 clients.
Yeah, really profound, Sam. I love that story. It also tells a lot about, if we say, can entrepreneurship being taught, there's the idea of what you had in mind at the early days of what is successful. But then once you understand what it takes to have that model of success you're talking about, you realize, no, that's not really what I want, right? It's not my vision. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. Fantastic conversation. But I think what I will have each of you do is share with us a key takeaway or parting shot that you would like our listeners or participants to take with them. Let me see if there's a question before we come to close. We'll have to catch. So somebody's asking about ways to gain or tap into our experience later. So we'll get these contacts from the hosts, and we'll be able to support you offline. There's no direct question at present. Okay, so parting shots. We'll start with Sam. One thing from this conversation, one or two things you think people really need to take away that you've shared before, or you'd like to just reiterate as important?
All right, this I haven't shared before, but entrepreneurship mostly is to do with money, where you're doing a product or service that brings in an income, then you're able to take care of your costs and then have some cash left behind to do one thing or the other. A book that I forgot to talk about that cuts across everyone is Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money. And the one thing that he said that's a big takeaway is that optimism and positivity and being confident and all that is what leads to growing money. So as an entrepreneur, you need to pitch and be confident that you will win the job. You need to come up with plans and go with the confidence that the plans will come through. That's what leads to growth. However, keeping that money needs you to now turn off that switch and pretend for a bit, what if tomorrow this doesn't happen? What if next year the economy goes down? What would I have to do this year to make sure that I'm surviving next year? Not, this year has been so good, we're going to open 3 more offices because we are up and up. So it's about balancing between your optimism, which is what's going to help you get money, of course, in structures and knowledge and all that, and pessimism, which is going to help you keep money and protecting that money as if it will never come again. And then the rest follows.
Very, very deep. Wow. Stephen, that is a sobering thought. I think I'll reflect, take a moment.
I have to say that I think Sam and I have similar tastes in books, because I actually typed on the chat at some point, Psychology of Money is also a good one. Then I deleted it because I let the conversation go on. It's one of my favorite books. And I think one thought just from that, I guess maybe it resonates almost to what you're just saying, that the skills that you need to make money are different from the skills that you need to keep money, right? When you're making, it's all about risk taking, etc. Keeping money is also not just spending money in the wrong way. But for me, the 3 key takeaways. One is, it's just a statement. There's no ideal time to start. So if you haven't started yet, I don't think there's a time where everything aligns and this is the time that you need to do it. So don't wait too long. Of course, there's more complex times and less complex times for you to get started. So I think that's one key thing that I just learned when I started the business. For me, there was probably just more alignment when I started, because I remember I'd learned how to be broke. So I said, let me just go with it at that point. I think for me, the second thing is unit economics. If you, whatever you're doing, please make sure you understand what it costs you to, even if it's a service business, whatever service, what does it cost you to, get that unit out there? That's such an important thing, because then you know what you're charging for it. And that's why you see some businesses which can price things very cheaply and very expensively. The guys who can do it very cheaply is also because they understand the unit economics really, really well. And then the last one is this whole idea about the role of coaching. That the journey doesn't have to be just about you. There's people who've walked this journey in the past, and just sitting with them and just sort of like going through a process helps a lot. Because many entrepreneurs have blind spots and they're not aware of them. And it's lonely to be at the top because your core employees, etc., the guys you've hired probably will not tell you some of these things. Maybe if you have a good co-founder, they'll tell you some of these things. So having someone out there that you can bounce off ideas helps a lot in terms of just opening out how you're thinking and, figuring out what the right way to approach things. Thank you very much. And I wish everybody here success as they figure out the next steps. Thank you, Laila.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, my co-panelists. So we'll stop there, everybody. It's been a wonderful conversation. You can see that my co-panelists have a depth of wealth and wisdom. Please follow them. There's Stephen Gugu, Victoria Business Angels Network. You can follow any of those. There's Sam Mwangi with Social Meds Digital. Please follow them and see what they're up to, what they're thinking. They have a lot to teach. This wisdom, you don't have to make all these mistakes in order to get wiser. There's myself, Laila Masharia. Please follow me. I also have a lot to say and to share. But I also want to really thank Nexford University for hosting us. Nexford is an online university out of the US that's available in our markets to help people prepare themselves for the future of work, especially digital transformation. And they are launching soon a master's in entrepreneurship. So if this has inspired you to start a business or to get into the area of entrepreneurship, either as an entrepreneur or the whole ecosystem that supports entrepreneurs, because in our region we have many entrepreneur service organizations, please check out Nexford, see if this program is one for you. And keep following Nexford to see what you could learn for them. So we're all here for you, wishing you all the best. Thanking you, my co-panelists, and thanking Nexford. Thanks very much, and see you next time.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Laila, for the expert moderation. And thanks, Sam, also.
Thank you.
Bye.